Welcome to the Board Game Snobs podcast. Critically harsh reviews with a touch of class.
And go.
Welcome
Make it better this time, Jerry.
to the Board Game Snob podcast. This is the second time we've had to do this intro due to technical difficulties. That's okay. It doesn't lose the magic second time around. At least that's what I'm told. This is a podcast about board games, sorta, kinda. Sometimes we get off topic.
Off topic.
I am the host. No,
You're not the. Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm
Sorry.
the star. I'm the
host?
star.
I mean, isn't this co-hosted?
no. Technically, Gabi's the host. I am the star.
I am the primary host of
okay.
the show. Jerry is self-proclaimed primary star. Primary star. That's like Venus, right? In the morning.
You are
look
the
up.
host / bartender, and you've made me a very suspicious, very dirty martini.
He has been staring at it for a long time.
There's stuff in this. You have roofied me.
That is olive.
I love how you show your suspicion of the martini by absolutely guzzling it down. as quickly as you can.
Well, you know, sometimes you just want to know what's in there.
And that voice is the voice of the let's see, the
Inestimable.
famous YouTuber of 5 Games for Doomsday.
And he does the designer.
Dice Tower design notes
Design.
or
Oh,
designer.
That's right. Cheers, Gobby. At least one of you had the decency to remember my work.
Something like that. And star of stage and film,
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Benjamin
Franklin.
Maddox.
Yes.
I wish my middle name was Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin.
That's much better than my actual middle name.
What is it? We're getting all people's middle names. We're making a list.
It begins with W.
Wayne.
Wilhelm.
Yeah, it's Wayne.
Wayne.
Embarrassing's that.
Wayne.
Well, it's got to be William, like all the rest of the English.
No, I wish it
William.
was. It's Wayne, unfortunately.
That is
my
something.
My brother named me after John Wayne.
Oh, it is Wayne.
It is.
Oh,
Wayne is a hillbilly name. If it's your first
Yes, It
name.
certainly is. If it's your first name.
If it's your
your middle name, you just hide it.
No, you just do
Don't
the
tell
W.
anybody.
You do
at
the
least it's
until you-
not Dwayne.
Oh.
Because then you have to go through the joke, knock, knock, who's there? Dwayne. Dwayne the bathtub, I'm drowning.
Never heard that joke.
It's very good.
That's
I like it. See, we've had this discussion when somebody says, that's funny. That's very good.
It's that thing Americans do, and they go, "That's hilarious."
Well, that's
I mean, if it was hilarious, you'd be laughing.
it's
no?
not worthy of a laugh, but it's hilarious.
well,
Jerry, what do
sometimes-
you- no.
I'm sorry. I put my empty martini glass
Put it on
on
the
your very
table?
expensive table. I'm sorry. I will put the martini glass down here in its appropriate spot. Boy, you are uptight. Why don't you take a few more swigs of your dirty martini?
So,
sir?
Benjamin,
He knows what's in it. That's why he doesn't.
I've noticed your YouTube, 5 Games for Doomsday, has been
right.
defunct for the last 5 months.
I wouldn't say defunct is the correct word. On hiatus.
On
is what I'd say.
hiatus, is that due to your new gig on Design Notes?
No. It's just that I had previously a production assistant who helped me, and then we broke up. So
Wow.
I need to buy.
So
a camera
that wasn't
works without someone
you
else
doing
using
all
it.
that fancy stuff.
No, it wasn't me. No,
I was like,
I'm just the gorgeous on-screen talent.
I was like, Ben really knows he has a lot of talent knowing all this stuff, but his talent
Yeah.
is just looking good and talking smoothly.
Everybody's got to have.
Tapping is the correct word. Yeah.
Eh.
I'm very much the Orlando. I was very much the Orlando Bloom in that thing. You know, gorgeous with not a lot of talent.
I know how that is. The podcast not the podcast, the YouTube videos that you've been doing with these designers has been rather fascinating. I've been following not all of
I
them.
bet Gobby's seen all of them, hasn't he?
Yes, he's a shield.
What's that?
He loves the Dice Tower. He loves the Dice Tower. He thinks it's the go-to place for all things board gaming. But that's okay. You know, you can enjoy that. And we appreciate knowing that you had to sell out to go to the Dice Tower and kind of climb your way. Yeah, they're
Because
great.
I love this idea that there's some sort of indie authenticity to making a podcast about board games.
Yes,
And not making money, and then when someone offers to pay you to do something, you're selling out.
Sold out.
yes, you got to be very punk.
Jerry said it's not selling out; it's called buying in.
Buying in, yes, and
Exactly.
we would
Buying in.
love to sell out if Tom or anybody else would offer us, we would sell out. If you are a company who wish to give us even the most minute amount of money to shill for you, we will do it. Out on the curve. We are ready to sell out.
How many board game networks are out there?
Who knows?
There's Dice Tower.
There's
Dice Tower.
There's the Gateway Network.
There's the Gateway, which we're a part of.
Yes.
What's the Gateway Network?
That's exactly what
I'm disappointed that I've never heard of it. I do apologize.
The Gateway Network is a conglomerate of people who are, perhaps they're starting off, maybe they're slightly mediocre, and they want to surround themselves with other mediocre podcasts and content creators and learn from each other. And so it's like the gateway to
poor production quality.
Yes, and then you improve. Like you surround yourself. You know the saying that iron sharpens iron. Well, this is more like I don't know, some other soft.
I'm not going to say anything because it sounds like that I'm slagging off people I don't know. I mean, there could be lovely people involved in this gateway network.
They're lovely.
Oh, all of them are lovely. The guy who runs it is a raging alcoholic.
And he loves skulking.
And his producer Jeff can just
they have it's a conglomerate of podcasts, Instagram accounts, and YouTubes. And basically the idea is to just everybody shout each other out. I have not seen any uptick in downloads on our end. So
well,
I don't know.
We are the biggest content creator there.
No.
Which is why our backs hurt for carrying the Gateway Network. But
you know what they say, though, don't you? If you want to improve at something, surround yourself with people who are worse at it than you.
Yes.
Then you'll definitely improve. That's how it works.
Well, it's good for the self-esteem, though. That's the point.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't really want to discourage people from making any more content regarding board games, but the industry is overwhelmed.
There's enough.
And
stop.
There are a lot of people. Like we recently have done several ad reads for Podbean, which is the people who host us, until we can figure out how to get on Spotify. We get that big money.
We're on Spotify.
Are we? I want that Joe Rogan money. Where's we're the exclusivity?
They're not our host, though. That's for sure.
But people sit around and think, you know, my opinion is worthwhile. I think I should start a podcast or YouTube channel or something.
That's why we started. Why did we start, Jerry?
I think I was drunk with power, and I think I made comments
and alcohol.
Yes, I made comments regarding trying to overthrow perhaps the Dice Tower. And
now you want to be part of it.
And now I want to sell out so bad. I email Tom every day.
I'm sure that helps.
Okay, right. So I was approached by the Dice Tower to do these interview shows, right?
Oh, he was approached. He didn't approach them.
They reached out.
They reached out to you.
And so did I tell you this story?
No.
So basically I was watching a Tom Q&A. And he said something about, so he mentioned my podcast, and then he also said something about, we like to have other people on the top 10 lists. So I wrote him an email saying, can I come on one of these top 10 lists? And he said, yeah, next week. So I went on, and we did the top 10 list. And then he said, we were on this Zoom call, and he was like, okay, everybody, Ben, could you hang around after everyone's logged out, please? And so I was thinking, did I? What's the language on this podcast?
On ours? We're family friendly here.
English mainly.
Okay.
We do Spanish subtitles.
So I said,
you can say
"Shazur." My God, did I drop an F-bomb on the live broadcast or whatever? But no, he said, do you want to do these shows? So I said yes, because he offered me money. So let's work through a pitch of what you would do if you were going to approach the Dice Tower for some unique content.
Nudity. If the price is right.
The hatted man calls you.
The hatted man. What would we do for the Dice Tower besides add a touch of
Southern charm
and randomness? Yes, I do feel that Mike DeLisio adds a lot to the Dice Tower. Because he is a very
numbers.
Yes,
he has a lot of years
of life.
The AARP crowd has certainly come in, and there's a lot more geriatric listeners
I
Now,
wondered why they've been shilling early bird specials ever since Mike joined the Dice Tower. But now
You hear nursing homes around the world say, "One of us, one of us."
this episode of the Dice Tower brought to you by Denny's.
Pre-chewed food.
Oh, yes.
I was watching one of those. You know, when they were moving into the Dice Tower, they did sort of live videos.
Yeah.
And there was like a box in the corner with sort of adult nappies. And now it all makes sense, you see.
Oh.
So Tom calls Jerry.
If he calls my phone and I answer.
He calls you.
And I say, "Who's this?" "Tom who?" "This is Tom."
I'm looking for a healthcare hero. He
A
says.
healthcare hero. As my shirt advertises, I am so humble that I wear these shirts that make sure everybody knows. I would say, "Tom, listen. Here's what we do. We do banter, and we do humor, charm. We do it all, really, except board games." Which really, the Dice Tower is if there's one thing that it's lacking.
There's always, the pre-banter that accompanies every board game related media there is.
Exactly.
Not mine.
We are
not yours. That's true.
We are the foreplay of board game podcasts. We
That's
could
true.
warm up. Yes, that's exactly it. This is
things that you should be in the mood for.
exactly. We could do that for Tom.
Castle and Love Play.
So you two are drunk, so that makes sense. That the podcast meanders somewhat, right?
Slightly.
But like I don't want to slag off other media creators, and this sounds terrible, but doesn't your heart, if you listen to a board game podcast, doesn't your heart sort of sink a little when you hear people go, "So how was your week?" "I took the dog to the vet." I mean, doesn't it sink? Doesn't your heart sink a little? Don't you think, will you just get on with it?
We actually had a podcast a couple weeks ago about this very subject because I saw a tweet from a person I now follow, and they follow us, and we're like, yeah.
We stalk each other.
Yeah, we stalk each other. And it was about this very thing. Most people listen to board game podcasts. They want to hear you start talking about the board games.
That's true.
But almost every board game podcast starts off with, "Well, what'd you do this week, Bob?" And what you're just saying, "Well, I took the dog for a walk."
Well, you know
I hope they have a timestamps so that I can skip past all this.
So people think that if you allow them into the deadening minutiae of their lives, that you'll somehow develop some sort of parasocial relationship with them and give them tons of money. That's the reasoning behind it. You've got to get to know the person behind the
Yes.
shirt. Well, as far as I'm concerned, my perverse predilections are of absolutely no one's business, right?
Well, see, we've done just the opposite. We have built a fan base based on airing out our own personal dramas on this very podcast and our own.
But we don't do a "what did we do this week" thing.
No, but it wouldn't matter because we are both interesting people. I am a healthcare hero.
That's true.
You're a
I
truck
might need
driver.
you because my dad has a blood clot in his leg, Jerry.
Exactly. And see, these are
He started taking Eliquis, and it's a blood thinner. And now he's concerned, and we went to the doctor, and he was all scared. And I was like, "Dad, it's okay. Blood clots happen. I mean, sure, you could die any minute right now."
This is all interesting. We could do that, or we could just wear funny hats. And I'm wanting the hat.
I do have a question for you, though, and this is serious.
Oh, Jerry, it's a serious question. Pay attention.
I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm very listening. I'm ready for it.
So what have you been up to this week?
Okay, if we want to do that.
Has he got a story
I
for
got
you?
a story for you.
Healthcare hero engaged.
For instance, this shirt here.
See, fortunately, Ben, I was going to. I want to tell something honestly for once
Please,
in my life.
Be honest. Be real.
I had a message written to you about my dear friend Jerry and how he should be. I nominated him basically for 5 games for Doomsday.
Okay.
Because he leads an interesting life. I left myself out because I'm going to stop looking at the martini glass.
You roofied me. There's 2 of you.
I am a truck driver. My life is boring. I go up and down the highways. I might see a wreck every now and then. Jerry's life is fascinating because who's going to be at that wreck rescuing people or removing well, I won't go that dark. The dead bodies. That's going to be Jerry. So I had an email, not an email. I was going to message you and say, Jerry, he's an EMT. He's a part-time firefighter. Now he's engaged in the hospice. He went on, what was the podcast, Max Davey?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I listened to that
Talking about his autism and things he dealt with. His father was a Vietnam vet, how all that's influenced him. I was like, he's an interesting person, Ben. But you had us on your secondary show, not your primary.
It's not secondary. Are you trying to imply that I would ever do anything?
There's a tier.
It's all.
On the last podcast.
Dare you?
On the last podcast you were on, you said it was for the secondary tier. Your own words have got you. But anyway, Jerry's very fascinating. For instance, go ahead, Jerry.
Oh, well, no, put me on the spot.
Not to blow your own trumpet.
Not to blow your own trumpet.
I mean, if I could, I wouldn't leave the house.
As my
Joe Rogan can.
As my shirt advertised, I am a hero, because this is an audacious thing for which was given to me from my employer. But
do you know what's really heroic?
What's that?
Admitting that you're a hero.
I feel like, if you have to say it, it kind of does degrade the term. But I feel like if I don't talk about it enough, people will forget. What are you doing? What are you playing?
Oh, good for you.
I forgot about your sound drops. This is why we have you. This is why we have you. I delivered a baby just a few hours ago.
Where did you deliver it?
In the back of an ambulance going 80 miles an hour down the road. And so,
did you just leave one of those cards in the door saying you weren't at home?
You weren't at a little UPS. I put it underneath
outside in the greenhouse.
The doormat, fluffed it over so that the neighbors don't come, the porch pirates don't come take it. But yeah, I mean, I can't help.
You literally delivered a baby.
Yes, it came out the wrong way.
What do you mean?
It was
breech birth.
Breached. Yes.
All right. Okay.
There's a dark ending to the story that we won't discuss.
Well, there's always dark endings to all my stories, but either way, I find that it's interesting, as Ben was bringing out about the media people in board gaming. There are ones that you feel like you know them a little bit, even though you don't. Like we'll use Tom Vassell. Like I've met him a couple of times. He's an interesting individual, and he doesn't particularly. Everybody kind of knows his story and a little bit about him. Do you think it's better if somebody, and we can go from your perspective, as somebody who has climbed his way out of obscurity to now be the top rung?
That's right.
In the media.
Top rung.
I've heard the term Internet Titan thrown around numerous times.
That's for Dan Hughes. That's not for
Well, Dan has slid off. Dan doesn't even play board games anymore. Dan is getting into he collects toenail clippings or stamps.
They podcast once every 6 months.
Yes,
but the bastard's going to win the Spiel des Jahres.
Absolutely. Cora Quest, which I inspired, is a wonderful design, I believe, even though I've not played it. And if Dan would send me some...
The reviews aren't in yet, though.
Guineas or whatever they use over there for money, I would shield for him, whatever his company's going to be, coraquest.com.
But the point is... I was going to say something. The point is, he was complaining to me a few weeks ago that they haven't found a German partner to publish the game, and you can't win the Spiel des Jahres until the game is published in Germany, right? What he doesn't realize is I'm conspiring and I'm telling all the German publishers that he's a terrible human being because I don't want him to win the Spiel des Jahres.
That'd be awful. Do you think...
I hate it when my friends have success.
Well, as I tell Gabi often, it's not only that I have to succeed, others must fail.
Sure.
You stand
What's that Japanese? There's a phrase. It's something like the failure of your friends tastes as sweet as honey, or something.
Yeah, standing on the bodies. So, as somebody who has climbed their way out of obscurity and is now a top rung media person in board gaming,
top rung.
What if you were going to give advice to the pusillanimous peasants there are out there? What
pusillanimous?
Me and Ben are the same. Me and Ben both have thesauruses. What would you give them?
I was in a play for 3 months, and one of the lines was the definition of pusillanimous.
What is the definition of pusillanimous?
I can't bloody remember.
It's timid. But what advice would you give somebody who perhaps is struggling. They have their own podcast. They have their own media. Besides just stopping, because that's what most need to do. They need to go about their business.
Yeah, there's enough. So everybody stop.
But those that have the drive,
Hard drives. You need that.
What suggestions would you give them?
Never give up.
I feel
Never
very
surrender.
misplaced to give any advice whatsoever. But I once
Stop your
mentored
false
someone-
modesty.
I once mentored someone. I entered this mentorship program for podcasts, and I agreed to mentor a guy. And so he sent me his first episode of his podcast, and I basically sent him my notes on what I think. And I said, you need to focus on what is the central core of the show. That is the main point, right? So he did this show where he's partially sighted. And so in part of the show, he talked about being a partially sighted gamer, right? Yet the rest of the show was very standard sort of, this is what I've played this week sort of stuff. So my notes to him were, you have a really interesting core idea that you're watering down with all of this other unoriginal, non-standard stuff. If you want my recommendation, you should focus on the central core of what your show is. So I have, the idea that I ripped off BBC Radio 4, and you guys have the fact that you're irreconcilable drunks,
It's like,
which is
He
from
was-
the outside very, very.
He was
charming.
struggling to figure out, define us just then.
I went for drunks, and so the thing is, if you listen to, the problem is right. I'll give you an anecdote to highlight kind of what I'm trying to say. I was part of a theatre company back in the 2000s, and there was a guy in the theatre company who was getting small parts in the play, but he was also doing a lot of tech backstage. He was building sets, he was rigging lights, and all of this sort of stuff. And all he wanted was to be an actor. And he was awful, absolutely awful. But he was a wonderful technician. The stuff he was doing with the set and the stuff he was doing with the lighting was really great, and that's where his talent lay. But he wanted to be an actor, so he sacrificed a lot of time to this dream that was never going to be achievable because he was awful. So there are certain people. The reason, so this show and Sporadically Bored are very much birds of a feather, I think. And the reason the shows work and the reason they're entertaining is because the people doing them should be in front of a microphone. There are some people that simply shouldn't, and that's fine. They're skilled in other ways, but the internet has taught us that we should all strive to be famous, and we shouldn't necessarily. Because, having been an actor and for a long time, and having done zero in my career, I understand how difficult that is. So, I mean, I would say my advice to someone would be to seriously think, are you any good? And be brutally honest with yourself. And then if you come to the conclusion that, probably not really, go and save elephants.
Do you think people can be brutally honest with themselves? That's a hard trait for people.
Well, I feel like social media, especially Instagram, is just a self-congratulatory circle jerk, right? In which you are, whatever kind of facile, mediocre achievement that you've managed to do that day is greeted with unfettered applause. The fact that you managed to go to the bloody supermarket and have a shower is not applause-worthy, in my view. So social media makes it even more difficult. It makes it very, very difficult.
Yes.
It makes it very, very easy, by the way, to cast aspersions on others' lives and pass judgment on the worth of other people, but almost impossible to pass legitimate judgment on yours. The point is, no one's crap at everything. So, for instance, I'm crap at 99% of things. There's 1% of things I'm all right. I'm very good at moaning, and I'm very good at being a bolshy drunk.
You're a
hold on
good
to
cyclist,
those things.
right?
Hmm?
A cyclist?
I'm
You
not a good
bicycle.
cyclist.
You're not?
I'm an enthusiastic cyclist.
Oh,
but I'm a
okay.
good
There you go.
cyclist. So yeah, you should be brutally honest with yourself, and so I often appraise my skill at things. What I would say realistically, and people often say to me, "Oh, don't be so hard on yourself," and I'm like, "I'm not being hard on myself. It's a true, realistic reflection of my particular skill." So I was talking about. I've been playing the guitar. I've been writing songs recently, and they're kind of not very good. And I said to someone, I'm just a dickhead who sits on a sofa and strums a guitar. And they said, oh, don't be so hard on yourself. And it's like, no, you don't understand. I'm not unhappy about that. That's just how it is, right? I'm just not very good. And it's not false modesty either, by the way. Whereas if someone were to say to me, can you give yourself a realistic appraisal of how you think you are as a voiceover artist? For instance, as I would say, well, I'm a professional standard voiceover artist, and there's a whole mountain of evidence to back that up because lots of people have paid me to do it. But you should be realistic, I think, about your own strengths and weaknesses. And there are certain things that you're just irredeemable at, right? And that's fine because we can't be good at everything. If I couldn't decide tomorrow, that's it. I'm going to be a bloody mathematician and I'm going to work hard and I'm going to be a mathematician.
Well, I think people don't temper their expectations. And I think when they get into whatever type of media, and I think it is influenced when they see TikTok, where these 14-year-old girls are just on there making these TikToks and having millions and millions of followers, where they think they can do something and be as famous or as successful or whatnot. And they don't realize that in board gaming, it's such a small market. There's so much content out there already that if you're going to put something out there, you have to decide. And like I said, temper your expectations and realize you're probably not going to be incredibly successful. And so if your thoughts are you're trying to make something to where this is going to be your job, this is what you're going to, or make some sort of income from, you're probably not going to do it. But if you're just going to do it just to have fun, if it's just simply I mean, that's the only reason I do this podcast is Gabi enjoys it. I absolutely hate talking about myself and how wonderful I am, or just having to describe.
Hates it terribly.
But the podcast allows us this opportunity to get together, and it's something that we enjoy doing. It just so happens we're so good at it.
I mean, undeniable.
And then
so yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Because so my constant frustration with my show is that it doesn't make enough money. Mm-hmm. I'm not able to support myself from the work I do in the media. Now, there could be any number of reasons, but you should always entertain the reason it's because you're not that good, right? That's absolutely justifiable. You might not have the idea or the charisma to carry it off to the extent where it becomes super popular that you can make enough money. And so if you are doing it just to throw stuff out there and chat to your mates once a week, then more power to you. But yes, you shouldn't expect the riches of Croesus to rain down upon you.
And I've used Richard Simpson as an example for this, as somebody who has done like over 400 episodes of his podcast. And I really enjoy Richard Simpson's podcast, The We're Not Wizards, which has been on hiatus for several months. And Richard is one of those guys that does something different. It's this long form interview, very thoughtful, very back and forth. And there's a yeah, you're on camera there, Jen. With
I don't know what he's doing.
I have no clue what he's doing. Oh, he was trying to something.
Stop up some noise.
His wife.
His
wife vacuums every time I come over. I take it personal. So with Richard though, his podcast, he'd often lament that it wasn't as popular as you would think something would be after doing it for so many years. But Richard was actually very talented. And often I had brought up, like, you're excellent at what you do. Perhaps it's just the audience is just not there for it. Sometimes you're a rock band and you're playing for the wrong crowd. You're playing for the wrong group, and maybe there's just not enough people that would appreciate what you do. And I've been fascinated with what you're doing on the Dice Tower with interviewing these designers. I would assume that that's a very small audience of people and who watch the Dice Tower, that there's only going to be a handful of that percentage that are going to watch and listen to about these designers. But I was shocked how many views these videos get regarding just you talking for 30 minutes to an hour to these particular ones and talking about the various issues that they've had. Is there a way, and you're very good at interviewing people, which is something that we don't interview people. We just have people on and we yell at each other. Is there a what's the procedure that you go through when you know
the same thing I had written down?
Oh, well, I'm looking at your notes. When you're getting ready to interview somebody, like you did, was it Johnny Pack and the various other ones that you've interviewed, especially.
It's good that you've watched one.
I watched one, and I've watched Tony Bardell. There's several of them. I'm naming names, but. What's the steps that you go to get ready to interview somebody? The questions that you think of? How do you delve down into trying to get these very awkward, very encapsulated people to open up? Because I would assume most designers are just weirdos.
So I'll go through the process of this particular thing because it's relatively new and I remember it, the Dice Tower stuff. So Tom asked me to do this show. He said he wanted an interview show. And I said, what do you want? And he said, I don't care. I just want an interview show. So I had to come up with a structure that was mine, right? I had to come up with the idea, which is fine. I mean, of course, I'm being paid. That's what I'm being paid to do. So I thought I need to do something that's interesting. But firstly, it's the Dice Tower. And the Dice Tower is very focused on not dealing with sort of politics and things, right? And so I needed to do something that was not going to really engage with political aspects of gaming and stuff. Also, I needed to do something that was not going to cannibalize my own podcast, because my podcast deals with the personal life of these designers, right? So I didn't want to do a show on the Dice Tower that was just essentially a 30-minute version of my show. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll do a show that focuses on their design process, trying to get the sort of idea of how they make games out to the public. Because you're right, it's a small amount of the Dice Tower audience, but there's no doubt in my mind that a percentage of people who watch board game media are also aspiring game designers. So getting that feedback from proper bona fide game designers, I think, is useful. And not only, and useful is fine, but it's not the most important thing. Interesting is the most important thing. And how do I get the answers out of them? I write all the questions beforehand, and I give them the questions beforehand. It's very simple. Some of the questions are off the cuff, but basically I just prepare because I am scared to death of not knowing what to ask. So I write all the questions.
How do you decide who?
How do I decide who?
Yeah.
Who to have on?
Like people games you like, or...
Yeah, it's so when I first started the Dice Tower stuff, if you look at the first 5 episodes, it's essentially people I'm actually friends with, right? That I know I can just send a mail and they'll say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then afterwards, and because the thing is, because I've done 5 games for Doomsday for 4 years now, I essentially have the contact of almost... I have a contact of a lot of board game designers, right? And they've been on my show and they realize that I'm not an idiot. And so most of them are quite amenable. I just interviewed Richard Garfield again, right? And he was very amenable to coming on because he's dealt with me before and he knows, I ask fairly interesting questions.
I listened to your 5 games for Doomsday, and going along with the whole previous conversation, in that particular show, I would say you don't let like Jerry's thing with Richard was in a straight up interview show. It's hard for a lot of personality to come through. For you, it's just question, answer. And you've already sent them the questions, kind of what, or exactly what they're going to say. They probably ad lib a little bit, but I was wondering on your end as I listened to your show, and I said this in the last podcast, actually, sometimes, like, you just have it straight up question, answer, and they know what's coming, right?
Well, if they've read the show notes. A lot of people haven't read the show notes.
Oh, really? So
Sure. I send them and I say at the beginning of the show, before we start recording, I said, did you manage to have a look at the show notes? And invariably, all of them say yes. And you can always tell which ones are lying.
So then you don't know ahead of time what they're going to say generally.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. But I was listening to, in particular, Dan Thoreau, who we absolutely love here at Board Game Snobs. Brilliant man, and sounds like he's got his head. I'm very just.
He's a little worryingly intelligent. I always feel kind of very, very, very insecure when I'm in a room with people who are much, much more intelligent.
Yes. It's.
I'm very relaxed on your show.
But what I was getting at is like, so for you, you don't ad lib anything, do you?
Sometimes.
Because on Dan's show in particular, like he went into like some of his personal history about, I think he talked about, was it the Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts and all this?
Yeah.
And like he answered that and it was like some dark stuff. They're like, so the next game you bring to the cabin is, and I was like, I would have felt like you would maybe delve deeper into that. Was that a decision you made on purpose? Like, or like how and not just him, but certain people, they'll tell you, sometimes they'll say something. I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. But then you like go to the next question, which is good because that keeps it going and you have a definite thing you're shooting for and a definite
You
end.
mean he doesn't let them ramble aimlessly with no point?
Well, that's my question.
Yes.
Is it to prevent that or is it... I'll let you go ahead and answer.
You need to get to the end of the show. So interestingly, I got a comment on this very thing, on that very show, on my blog a couple of weeks ago. Someone was absolutely incensed. They wrote saying, Dan was opening his heart to you, and you just, like a robot, go on to the next point. That's so unprofessional. It's disgusting. And I wrote a very nice, I wrote them back and said, thank you for your input. I happen to not agree, but thank you very much for commenting.
Do you still have that email, Jerry?
The point is, if someone brings up something very personal on my show, that's good. And if you notice, if that happens, what I tend to do is after they've answered the question, I will leave a moment of silence. Then I will move on. My show is not a psychological evaluation, and it's also not a deep dive into traumatic events that have happened in people's lives. If they happen to bring them up, I think it's very interesting, but I don't feel within the context of my show that I would be showing them due respect to then focus for 20 minutes upon something that many could find salacious, essentially.
That's what we could bring to the Dice Tower. People can come on and pour out their most personal, darkest thoughts and feelings, and we could clumsy just go through it.
Salaciousness.
And not give any answers, not actually help, but just bring it to light.
No, what? We have nothing to say that's going to help you.
We're not here to help. We're just basically going to Dr. Phil this.
My God, mate, you're in a terrible state. You should really speak to someone about it.
Sucks to be you.
Do you remember what happened to the Cash Me Out Batgirl? She's a millionaire now rapper. The same might be for you.
Also on OnlyFans.
Come on to PTS Board Gaming.
Not that I'm subscribed.
OnlyFans.
What's OnlyFans?
No one knows.
It's a website that just has oscillating fans.
Okay.
You sit and it's kind of like, that when you need
it's
that.
like when you're building a house and you're like, what sort of fans do I need in here? Well, you got to have ceiling fans.
Will it reverse?
Window fans. Reverse?
You never know. You can reverse your ceiling fans for winter.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you're an animal.
But so that's what I was thinking about.
So with the Dan Thoreau thing, right? I might have just messed up the editing. Because you're not the point is it should feel natural and you shouldn't feel like, ooh, that was abrupt. So that might just have been
it wasn't abrupt. I've come to realize and now I appreciate that. What you're saying in the context of the show, you're saying, you get to know them a little bit. These 5 games they're bringing to the cabin, but also it's an interview show. And most people, or what everybody tries to do generally is like, especially with podcasts, are like, it's a long form conversation. But your show is not a conversation.
Absolutely not. No,
it is straight up. You have a few, even a lot of your beginning questions are standard. You ask them the same questions, but then you get into the more of the details of some of their personal stuff.
Right.
But then you get into the cabin thing.
Well, you really can't delve down into it, because then it ends up being like this podcast where we have to edit out so much stuff. I mean,
yes.
Mike Licio came on and we couldn't use any of it by the time we got through asking him questions.
I've spoken to him a couple of times personally, and frankly, I was disgusted.
Matthew Jude cried, and we just had to cut it out. Like, it was very awkward.
Something all alone, blah blah blah.
I know. This is where you need to come on. This is like Love Connection for board gamers. So if you, maybe now's the time we could psychoanalyze Ben. What's your deepest, darkest secret?
Well, look, we've been talking about Richard, and if you want to use Richard as an example, right?
There's a good guy.
Richard's a stand-up, right? And so clearly Richard is brave enough to enter a recording studio, inverted commas, with another person and kind of fly by the seat of his pants, and he's very good at it. I'm just not that courageous. Mm-hmm. And I have a plan, and I want to execute the plan. And maybe, so it has its benefits and it has drawbacks, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, no, that's what I've come to appreciate the difference between your show and other conversational style interviews, because those they just like if somebody sees something, they go after they meander, and then if somebody brings up something, well, then they go into that. But yours is like, I like the efficiency of yours, if that makes any sense.
So basically, it's based on a BBC Radio 4 show called Desert Island Discs. The format. And Desert Island Discs is that. Desert Island Discs is very efficient because it's broadcast and a radio schedule. They need to bring it in. They need to look at the life of a person in 45 minutes, right? And so that was my goal with the show. Initially, I wanted it to be 45 minutes long, but of course things spiral out of control, so it's longer than that. But that's fine. Podcasts allow that, right? And so my goal with the show is to be as efficient as possible, and even more so with the Dice Tower videos. I don't want them to be longer than 30 minutes, by and large. And I think it's important. But then again, what do I know? Joe Rogan's shows. Especially since the ivermectin thing.
You should start
longer and longer.
Have you tried DMT? If you would, there's so many things that you could do that really engage your guests for 2 hours.
Well, I had Jerry left me alone one time, and I had the designer of Kickstarter, Fractal.
Right.
They wanted to come on the show. And so I messaged Richard. I'm like, I've never interviewed nobody. I don't know how to do this. And he gave me some pointers. And then I realized there is such an art to interviewing people. And I also told Jerry this later on. I was like, now I see why Ben does it the way he does, because I would ask him a question and he would answer it. And I felt the compulsion to acknowledge the answer every time. Like, oh, interesting. Oh, okay. Like after they were done, I was like, no. And so I cut all that out in the post, because I was like, so that now I like what Ben does, because like he answers a question, they answer it, on to the next question, because it sounds silly when you go, oh, interesting after every comment. It's like,
because the problem is, so I've noticed this with people. They go, oh yeah, fascinating. The problem is then you have 5 seconds of dead air when you wait for the other person to acknowledge the compliment you've just given them. So don't compliment them.
Yeah.
So it's up to the audience, I think. So you should never forget. I'm very much of the view that you should never forget that what you're doing is a piece of entertainment fundamentally, and you should. A conversation is a conversation. A podcast free-form conversation is not a conversation. It's a podcast. It's a produced piece of work. You should always intend to make it as interesting as possible, right? When I am having conversations with other people, I don't converse like this. I speak in half sentences and I refer to experiences that only me and the person in the conversation know about. If you ever, what's fascinating is if you ever read a transcription of an actual conversation, they make no sense. They make no sense. If you read, just people are sat in the pub and you transcribe exactly what they say. They speak half words, half sentences. They refer to stuff that, happened to the pair of them 20 years previously. And they only have to say one keyword and both of them instantly know what they're talking about, right? They make no sense. Things like this are not conversations. They're heightened conversations, is what I would say.
They're a production. It is almost like theater, and I mean, you're not necessarily. And to digress back to the previous point about people airing out their personal life or trying to have their personality come through a podcast, you don't always want that. Like you want
I don't at all.
No, you want a persona. You want something to be like very obviously in our podcast. Gambi plays this very meek and timid person, and people don't realize he's an MMA fighter. And like I myself,
Navy SEAL.
That's right, you're Navy SEAL.
False valor. What's that called?
It's stolen valor. Stolen valor. Yeah. The Gabi.
And in reality, you both speak with Welsh accents. I couldn't believe it when I first came on the Zoom call and you were like, all right, boy, what's a pint? I couldn't believe it.
I also do Russian as of the last episode.
Oh, nice.
And I'm incredibly timid, humble, and completely not like my on-air persona. But it fits the narrative. You're trying to create something that's entertaining for the listeners, but at the same time, occasionally yourself will bleed through. You'll have something personal. Sure. After doing the podcast for 4 years now, I mean, you'll have a moment where your true personality comes through, or there's something that you can see, and the audience feels that. And I think that's really what is missing in that long form media, is that if you're going to try to make the podcast interesting via your own experiences, you have better be interesting. Because the airwaves are filled with people who are much more relatable and entirely more interesting than you. And so I think that's where a lot of people get this in their head, that they are going to become popular and have a following and be able to make it in what really is a clickbait industry, and something that is
just ask Ignacy.
Yes, with just content everywhere, and they think that they are going to add something to it, and really, it's just more of the same. And I think that is a difficult, and I sound like I'm discouraging people, although here previously I think I did say nobody should be doing this.
Yeah, everyone stop.
But I think you need to temper your expectations and not look at this as if you're going to be wildly successful. And I think that makes
my
it
goal
much
with my podcast, right, is when I'm doing the interview podcasts, my goal is to have my voice in it as little as possible. That's my goal, right? So the biggest nightmare. So Jamie Stegmaier was very nice guy, don't get me wrong, but he has this habit. It's an instinctive habit, and it's born out of his social media technique of finishing any kind of speech with a question, right? So he'll talk about something and then say, if you look at him on Instagram or Twitter, for instance, Instagram especially, he was like, I played this game. What do you think about these mechanisms? And he did it a lot in the interview, which is a nightmare because firstly, I'm the one asking the bloody questions. And secondly, I don't think my opinions, you shouldn't be listening to the 5 Games for Doomsday podcast to know anything about me, to know anything about my opinions. My role in that podcast is simply to facilitate someone else saying something interesting, right? This is why when I come on podcasts like this, I talk a lot, because I guess my role here is to talk and hopefully be interesting. But in my podcast, I want to be in it as little as possible, right? So if I'm interviewing you, don't ask me questions because I don't want to answer them.
And we appreciate that. As little as possible is best.
Where do you see your show going on the Dice Tower? Do you see yourself continuing on doing the designer notes, or are you going to try something else?
Well, I guess so. The Dice Tower stuff is contracted work, right? It was a commission. I was asked to do something, and I guess I will do it until they ask me not to do it anymore.
So, do you have a set time, like you for a year? Try it for a year contract?
No, there's no contract involved.
Oh, okay.
I just so I pitch guests to Tom. He writes back and says, "Yeah, they're cool," and then I go off and do shows.
The ones he says no to.
To be fair, he hasn't said no to anyone.
Okay.
Oh, it's just, that's what we could do. We could do the guests that were the rejects. The rejects. Let's have
Dan
that.
Hughes.
Dan, yeah. When are you going to interview Dan Hughes and ask
not
him?
having him
ask him where.
Well, I played a bunch of dungeon crawlers and decided to make my own, very much like the ones I've played.
Yeah, but for kids. Yeah, Dan. But if you had to, go ahead.
Quick question. I was asked, due to what we've discussed here and the kind of like the bam, 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 not the coldness of it. That's not the proper term. But I was thinking, when we have people on our show, oftentimes we do develop a relationship. That's kind of,
it is a relationship.
It's a relationship.
I'm progressively taking off my clothes as the conversation goes on.
But you do, with some people, you develop a relationship. And like that's sometimes kind of I look forward to getting to know this person better, and then even off podcast, we message each other every now and then.
Triple D, I DM Delicio daily.
So, do you look for that in any of your? I guess not because of the style of your show, or do you?
No, absolutely not. I don't look for friends through my show. But there are some people, and I don't think it affects the interview. I don't think you can tell in the show, but there are some people that you instantly warm to. Mm-hmm. And there have been people that I've stuck on the line with for a couple of hours after interviewing them. Usually I don't have much time afterwards. Yeah. Because especially as it's usually dealing with Americans, so it's usually late at night. But there have been people that I've been on the line with and I've chatted to, and we've had a conversation, And then there are people that I've had on the show that have done great shows that I have just instantly within 2 minutes of getting them on the line, thought this is not someone I'm going to develop a friendship with in the future.
Well, we've experienced something like that since we kind of went through a dry spell, I guess you could say, of board gaming, mainly due because I'm healthcare hero, pandemic.
Right, exactly.
Hashtag. Yeah.
Hashtag sacrifice.
So we've been having just various listeners and people who we found us to be interesting, just random people on the show. And just ones that we have had on, there were many times where afterwards we just talking amongst ourselves going, we really enjoyed
sheer boredom.
I'm talking about like Denva and Jared. And I mean, we had like an epidemiologist from California. And
if you notice, I'm classy enough not to mention any names. Positive or negative.
No, we drop names. We're all about. We fat shame people. It's awful.
These are our listeners that we've had on. We've had 3 so far,
and there's some that really sucked, and there's some that we're going to have on that we know will suck, but that's okay. Like Frankie, we love you. You can come on the show, but that will be fine.
Frankie, I love you.
Frankie is a good person deep down.
Okay. Can I unwind on a little bugbear that I've been having recently?
Go ahead.
I don't give a monkeys. I do not give a flying monkeys. It's really difficult not to swear.
I know you love to swear.
I really do. I do not care about the moral character of the people who produce the work I consume.
Really?
I don't give a monkeys if someone's a good person.
You can say
are they
frag.
good at what they do? Are they entertaining? are they able to achieve what they're planning to achieve in a professional, engaging manner? Then good. I don't give a monkey's how good you are. And don't try and justify your place in the world by saying I'm a good person. Because morality in so many ways is relative. So I don't give a monkey if you're a good person.
So you don't cancel people.
I mean, so to cancel people, firstly, you need influence, and I don't have any. And secondly,
personally, you don't cancel people based on their actions.
Yeah, but that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I'm not consuming their work. If I think someone's so what's really interesting is actually mostly if I don't take to people, if I don't get along with people, it's not because they're morally defunct or anything. I just don't like them. Which is nothing to do with their views on immigration or, the equality of people in society. Mostly, it's just I sit at a table with them and I go, ugh, I don't like you for whatever reason. It's not a quantifiable thing in most cases.
I think Gabi's about to come out as a supremacist right there, as a Chilean supremacist. I think
Chile, viva Chile!
Everybody thinks it's the restaurant. the 2 for $20 meal. Everyone's like, yes, we're down for that.
We love awesome blossoms.
We love those. We love those volcanic, what are those cakes that have the hot chocolate in it? It was the guy from Star Trek who I absolutely don't really like.
Chekhov.
Wesley. I love Chekhov.
Oh.
Will Wheaton, who had a nice article here recently about...
he still does stuff, huh?
He was talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy the Vampire.
The vampire
player. She kills banjo players. And Joss Whedon.
I'm gonna kill you, Cletus.
Poor old Susanna.
Not every banjo player is named Cletus.
Or Southern. That's how dare you?
Are there Northern banjo
Steve
players?
Martin.
Steve Martin. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Besides, and Ed Helms. Ed Helms.
Okay.
I was going to say Earl Scruggs then, but I assume he's very Southern, isn't he?
Yeah, Earl Scruggs. There's 3 famous banjo players. There's Steve Martin, Ed Helms, and the guy from Deliverance, the pig guy. But what Will Wheaton was bringing up was about Joss Whedon and all the terrible accusations that happened while making Buffy.
Will Wheaton talking about Joss Whedon,
and he was talking about how you can take you can look at the person's work and not the person.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate that because a lot nowadays, people they go by that. They talk about people who they feel like, these are nice people, like to your point.
There's an insidious implication there, isn't there?
You're right.
So if you look at especially Twitter, what Twitter thrives upon is accusation.
Mm-hmm.
Accusing people of not having the correct moral propriety. It's very, very similar to the Victorian era. Did you show your ankle? Then you don't deserve to be part of society, right? It's very, very similar to that. And what the insidious implication is, and it's only an implication, and if you were to bring people to task on it, they would deny it. But the point is, the insidious implication is this person has been accused of X, therefore this person is immoral. Therefore, if you like their work, you are also immoral. So to prove your morality, to prove your good standing within society, you have to deny things that bring you joy, that bring you pleasure, that have absolutely in their content zero to what the person has been accused of. And if you don't do that, if you don't pay homage to the altar of self-flagellation, you are no longer allowed to be part of our dialogue. I find that disgusting.
As do I, because I think that
Ben was gesticulating wildly just then. He feels very passionate.
Well, that's why he's better. He's good on camera. I don't gesticulate a lot.
And he's not hard on the eyes either. Gonna be honest, Ben. You're a good looking man.
Come on.
I mean, you're not bad. I'm glad.
You and literally 0 women agree.
My wife come in, just sidebar. My wife comes in to the living room where I'm watching on my computer. I was looking up and watching all your just various videos of Ben Maddox. I'm just YouTubing Ben Maddox, and there was a scene from 2012 where the movie that you were in, the Grimm, the Snow White one.
Grim Snow White, yeah.
And I'm watching this, and I'm just in awe.
Ben knows that come up in his Google searches when he's got it setting,
Right.
Somebody Googles me.
And I'm watching this scene, and my wife says, What are you watching? I'm like, I know this guy. Like, she says, from where? I was like, well, I don't know him. I've talked to him. Which one?
And he refuses to look at you on camera. Have you noticed that, Ben? He does not look at the screen.
Look at the camera, no.
He's so awkward.
I
Ben.
said that one, the one that is so not the guy that got killed by the dragon, but the guy who's cutting out his heart to take back. And not to ruin, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the Grimstone War. Anyways,
you don't need to. It's terrible.
But there was something about watching that's like, I know this person, and it made it so much better. And I think that's what people look for with their entertainment. A lot of times they want to feel like they know this person. They want to feel like they know that this person's a good person or somebody that would hang out with them. This is their buddy, so to speak. And so thus they get connected with these celebrities, and then they start sending them emails and letters and hats and stuff and stalking them. And this is anyways, but they want to feel like this person, like they're relatable. And that they could, if the tables were turned and they live close to each other, they would be close friends. Right. And I think a lot of that comes from this idea of not being able to look at somebody's work and the person. Like, I don't assume that Tom Cruise is a great person.
I assume he isn't.
I assume that he's not.
I mean, he's a member of a cult, so.
Well, there you go.
I don't think he's even talked to his daughter, Siri. She's on the Apple iPhone. Talk to her.
Right. You were waiting for that to bring. Gobby knows I bring up. Gobby hits Tom Cruise jokes an awful lot because I talk about Tom Cruise and various other actors.
But he is
nonstop.
the best film movie runner that will ever be.
That man can.
It's true. He's very good at running.
Why?
Okay.
Why does he run like that?
It's amazing.
It's
okay.
amazing.
Very good at it.
It's very cinematic.
He's 5'6".
I wish when I ran, people would say, you run very cinematically.
Yeah.
Okay, back to your point real quick, though, about Twitter.
And I'm trying to get canceled. I've been trying for a long time.
Trying to get get canceled on your...
The problem is to be canceled, people need to actually hear what you say.
Don't get canceled on our show. Take it on your own show.
I'm going, we're not wizards.
Okay, but this is the thing, and I see this all the time on Twitter, and this is a phrase that, certain groups don't like, but it's a true phrase, virtue signaling.
Sure. So here is an issue, right? Cancel culture, virtue signaling. So the issue is, right, so what has happened with these two concepts is that the right have weaponized them. And they've started to call things that aren't virtue signaling. They've started to call things that aren't cancel culture. And what the people on the left have done have said, okay, these people on the right are using these terms in bad faith. So therefore, that means these terms don't exist, which of course is also equally as wrong,
yes.
Right? I've seen people cancelled, and I've seen people signal their virtue almost endlessly. I mean, I met this dickhead today.
Edit point.
That'd be fine.
Dickhead's all right.
It's fine.
Richard Head. Say Richard Head.
So
Richard?
I met this objectionable person today, who was wearing a T-shirt that said "Healthcare Hero." Can you virtue signal any more than that?
Okay. I agree 1,000%. But
I was given this shirt.
An example of what I was thinking, and I've seen this on several occasions, and I don't even know the person personally. They may be indeed a very virtuous person, but they say, I'm going to paraphrase it where no one can track this down, but they basically were saying, I saw someone had a disagreement with me, but I reacted a certain way and realized that this person has these issues and needs help, and I helped them. And that's very vague. But then at the end of the thing, they said, moral of the story is be kind. And I wanted to say, no, the moral of the story is you're saying you are very kind. Be like me.
Right.
Be like me is what you're saying.
And I was like, that is so ridiculous.
And it's absolutely immodest. It is false modesty, which is often the most immodest thing.
It's hard. Not everybody can be a hero. Do you think that, and I, as someone who's been
a hero,
I can't believe Dickhead's not fine.
It's fine.
Dickhead's not a swear word, is it?
No.
The English let anything fly. Well, I was watching The English Office, and they just throw around F words like it's network television.
We throw around C words. Speak to Richard.
Oh, Richard.
The Scots throw around the C word like it's.
I played Can't
They
Stop
throw a
with
lot of
him.
Like it's family dinner.
I played Can't Stop with him, and he had renamed it, and it's not the same. But the I thought, is this in the expansion? I'm not familiar with this game. What are you calling it? I didn't know if he was yelling. I thought he was just yelling at me the whole time. I was
All
like,
right,
what?
all right. Point of order, right? Point of order. You've said that this is a family-friendly show, right?
Sort of.
And then what Jerry has just said. Everyone absolutely knows the word he's referring to, right? Absolutely. Everyone is saying the word to themselves in their own
That's
heads.
true. That's true.
That's their problem.
But we don't want that E on our show on Apple, say.
Okay.
We're trying to sell out or buy in.
We're trying, but we'll never get on Dice Tower if we just throw the C and F word around, okay?
Well, Ben did it.
He did.
Well, it's
He
really
did a,
interesting. I did a video.
you did a whole show on cuss
defended
words.
swearing.
Yes, and I
And I
loved it.
swore a lot in that video. And
then
I uploaded that video the week after Tom had asked me to do the interview show. And I was seriously expecting to get an email saying, "Okay, mate, sorry, you're not doing this."
this isn't going to work out.
Do you think with not the Dice Tower, I'm talking about board gaming in general. What I'm seeing on Twitter and the various social media groups is that what we have just described, that this type of attitude, not just the virtue signaling, but the idea that you have to examine all these different facets of board gaming and then jump on this moral bandwagon. Is that something that you worry about in terms of board gaming, of it actually causing an issue in the community? Is that something that's like going to I don't want to say it's not going to tear the community apart. I don't think that. I think that's
already
real.
does.
Yeah, well, it does to a small degree
On Twitter.
Well,
on Twitter. But Twitter,
for the nine people who go.
yeah. It's like it's not. It seems like it's a big deal because there's people on social media that small minority that seems to make it a big deal, and it's not trying to. I often skirt this fine line of trying to not be somebody who downplays other people's concerns about matters just simply because it's like I don't see as this being a huge issue because sometimes my perception is not often wrong, but occasionally it is. So it's this idea of all these problems that are constantly being brought forth that we have to be concerned about, whether it be just name something. You can go on Twitter right now and find it. In the board gaming community, do you worry is that just something that's just isolated to board games? Is that just the type of people that the hobby attracts, or is that just something that it's just the loud minority?
Are you familiar with the term baking? Did I talk about baking the last time I came on here?
No.
So baking is a term that people use when they're talking about conspiracy theories. It's 4chan. It's 4chan. Language. Basically what it is. So what happened with Q? We were talking about QAnon earlier. What happens with Q is Q would leave crumbs. So his posts would have lots of cryptic things, right? And the anons. So Q is the person who would post. The anons would be the people who would take the crumbs.
Qbert?
And they would bake them. Right? That what baking means is to extract meaning from obscure things. Mm-hmm. Essentially, what it is letting fancies run wild. Right? So there are certainly things that need addressing in society, and people who play board games are part of society. And when communities come together, so there are certain things that are worth talking about in a mature way, not in 280 bloody characters, right? But also, there's an awful lot of baking. There's an awful lot of baking. This person said this, if you believe this, and then this, and then this, therefore they said this, therefore they're a Nazi, for instance, right? So there's an awful lot of baking. So I think you have to take these things on a case-by-case basis, right? You have to say, do I consider this to be a relevant and worthwhile argument? Or do I think that this person is just baking and making up stuff because it releases endorphins in the brain? Calling other people terrible releases a certain endorphin in the brain that is clearly very addictive.
I love it.
That's what Twitter is, right?
Yes,
and so I tweeted something, and this is so ironic because I always say Twitter is the worst place, and it is. But I did tweet something, and I tweeted, "Posting is not activism," and I truly believe this. It's absolutely true. If your realm of activism is Twitter, you are offering zero. Zero to the betterment of society. Actually go out and do something.
I have a rant that Gabi has heard numerous times about the term inclusive, which is the key word that you see on Twitter, and especially something that gets thrown around a lot on board gaming. And I remember we got I think it was an email from one of our listeners, and it was talking about being inclusive and things of that nature in board gaming, and it was asking our opinion. And I can't remember if I responded or if I just typed out this email and then deleted it. But Gabi got to hear the rant of how talking about going and yelling at people who aren't inclusive to be inclusive does nothing.
Zero.
And that how some things aren't inherently inclusive. Some things are people who think, I want to engage in this activity with the people that I know. And they have to break out of that. And that doesn't happen by somebody on some social media platform yelling at them and saying, this is what you should be doing. We should be doing this. We should be doing that.
But see, you're saying they're yelling. Why can't they just be bringing it to their attention?
When I say,
I see you're firmly on one side of this already.
No, I consider it yelling when it's posted ad nauseum every day. That it is something that is just constantly to the forefront. And I had brought it up several times saying, look, if you go to a board game convention and you want to be inclusive, basically meaning you want to bring people into this hobby, make it a welcoming hobby, you go out and you drag people into the hobby. You introduce it to them. You go to various people that you know. You make yourself available. You create groups. You go to libraries and help them institute having board games there locally or setting up these various clubs. There's a way of being inclusive. It doesn't happen on Twitter, and it drives me insane that there are just numerous, not just social media posts, but podcasts that talk about this topic constantly. And all talking about it does is make it seem like you yourself are one of these inclusive, all-powerful people who would always be welcome to entertain anybody in this hobby, where the fact remains the people who do that generally are not. And it's just a soapbox that I get on constantly about with Gabi, but rarely do I talk about it, just simply because it's something where you have to put your money where your mouth is. You have to be doing it.
So this is something I often argue, right? So if you look at sports people,
yeah,
they often talk about sports people having a moral obligation, right? And I think that is utter hogwash. Sports people have an obligation to be good at sport, right?
Right.
So what if my idea of my board game hobby is deliberately not inclusive, right? Mm-hmm. So, for instance, let me elaborate here. So what if I have a group of friends that I like, and we happen to like playing games with each other, and we have absolutely no desire to have anyone else sit at the table because me and my group of friends like to play games together, and that's how I choose to keep my free time. There is absolutely no moral element to that, in my view. This idea that I should be some sort of, because I'm into board games, that I should be some evangelist and allow anyone to just come and sit down, any rando to sit down and ruin my night with their execrable personality because everyone's terrible, apart from the people I've already vetted, seems absolutely nonsensical to me, right? I am not, so I happen to not be like that. Actually, I'm fine. I don't, it doesn't bother me if randos come and sit at my table. And I don't care who you are, by and large. But what I object to is this idea that I should, because I'm into board games, that I should be some sort of evangelist for board games. Absolutely not. If I wish to do that, then fine. But if I wish just to sit with the same two people week after week after week and play the same games with each other week after week after week, it's nobody's business.
Right. And I think that is something that is often not, I think that's often something that is not examined, because there are a lot of people in board gaming that do have that close-knit group that are not extroverted people. Like, I believe Gabi would not, he's talked about this in the past, you're not one that would go out to invite and be around other people. Whereas when we go to a convention, I'm out harassing random people. And it's...
When I go to a convention, I stick close to Jerry, because like if I play a game, it's going to be with Jerry and Enrique, and I'm not the person that goes up to a random table and asks, can I join in? Because that is not my personality.
You know, that's fascinating, because you do not come across like that at all.
I'm very in outside of my family and friends group, I'm probably the most antisocial person, or shy. I don't know what terminology you want to use. I don't go out of my way to talk to people at all. Like to an astonishing degree. Like if I'm with my wife and we go somewhere and we order food, I'll probably just tell her what I want to order, because I don't want to have to talk to that person. If we do anything, a customer service person calls, I don't talk to them. We've had this discussion before, but I'm not that type of person. Now, if me and Jerry and Enrique are sitting at a table and someone comes up to us and seems like a nice person, I have no problem letting them. Sure, let's play at this convention. But I'm not the person to go up to the table and say, hey, can I join in?
Whereas I will invade your privacy.
Jerry is very invasive.
I had gone to the store and bought a bottle of whiskey at the last BGG we were at, and was trying to bring it back into the hotel when somebody pointed out that they may not be quite pleased with me drinking, bringing that into the.
Jerry had a flask, and he was drinking out of the flask in front of everyone. I'm like, Jerry.
They said, don't do it. Well, as I'm coming through the board gaming table room, there were three pleasant-looking people that were trying to learn brass, which happens to be my game, and they needed a fourth. And I stopped and said, hey, do you need help learning this? They said, yes. So I set myself up. I said, do you mind? Do you want to play? Yes, of course. Not only will I teach you this game, but we can drink while I do it. And we sat there, and I don't remember these three people's names. We sat and we
Maybe
played.
The flask had something to do
We
with that.
played brass and we drank whiskey, and I had a wonderful time. I may have ruined their time, but it was a great time for me. And that idea that you have to constantly be, I don't know, my rant, don't get me on the rant about inclusiveness, but I firmly believe that there are just some people, due to anxiety, emotionals, whatever it is, that it's
not even that, though.
It's not even that. It's a choice.
The problem is, there's always this implication that you have to forgive it.
Right.
You have to say, well, I have some sort of mental illness, which means I'm not very... No. I just don't like random people is a good enough excuse, right? I just don't like random people.
Well,
sorry, you're not welcome because I don't know you.
Well, that's true.
That's fine, I think that's fine.
But the issue is, I think the big issue of inclusivity would be the fact that you would be saying, and this is not the case with any of us, but it would be the fact that, and this is what people imply when they bring this up. No, I don't want you here because you are blah, blah of a certain race, culture, ethnicity, gender. Yeah. But that's not the issue. On a smaller level, generally, like you're saying, it's like, no, you're outside of my friend group. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't care what gender, race you are.
And I am a person of sound mind, and I'm perfectly fine, and I can function within life perfectly fine. I just don't know you, so I don't want to sit down for 2 hours and have to force myself to be polite to you in my free time. I do enough of that at work, right? There's nothing wrong with that, I don't think.
But we are differentiating here between on a small scale of a friend group and the bigger scale of board gaming in general. Obviously, everyone should be.
And of course, the inherent annoyance about this, right, is it's all about unsaid implication. So when people talk about it and they drop these sort of signal phrases, what they're implying is, but look at me, aren't I a paragon of inclusivity? Aren't I a paragon of virtue?
That's all Twitter is.
Which is absolute tripe, right? Because they're human beings. On some days, they're great and outgoing and confident and they feel good. And some days you just don't feel like it. And that's fine. Don't tell me that you're an ascended master who is who feels completely wonderful about everyone in the world. Because firstly, you don't, because you demonstrate it every bloody day, that if someone slightly deviates from what you think, you go absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
So, just don't pretend to be an angel because you're not, because you're a human being.
That's something that always gets me about these people that they talk about these things, and that's why we don't generally go into these type of subjects, because
you delete them whenever I go on my rants.
But it's like these people that they spit this they go from talking about how you should be this type of person, that type of person. They take this high moral ground at the same time spitting this vitriol towards people that aren't or might take a different stance for whatever reason. It's like,
and it's completely oblivious.
That doesn't
it's
seem
completely oblivious that they're making the same.
Yeah, it doesn't gel with what you're saying, and it's clear. Like, no, obviously, we're not going to have Nazis in our play group. Like, that's okay. That's like universally acknowledged.
If some guy walks in with swastika tattoos, and they ask to play the game, I'm probably not going to have them sit down. But at the same time, right, if someone sits down, I'm not going to have them fill out a form telling me who they voted for in the last 4 general elections before I decide whether I want them to sit at my table.
You got to run a background check.
Right? And so, I have this theory, and this is controversial, and people look at me and they shake their head when I say this, but I think we need to focus on politics much, much, much less. We live in representative democracies, right? This is the operative word, representative. We vote for representatives to do our politics for us. Because if we bring in politics into every aspect of our life, we'll never speak to our families, because they're not going to agree with us politically, especially our parents, right? We're going to find out that someone we love absolutely every aspect about them. We've got on famously. And then you find out they voted Conservative in the last election, so I can't speak to them anymore because they somehow disagree with my core values. Well, my core values is basically not being a dickhead, right? And this is a really good point, so you can't cut out for that. My core values is sort of trying to be as decent as I can in a world that is conspiring to make me not decent every day of my life, right? The fact that you happen to vote. So I had a friend who voted Conservative like 2 or 3 general elections ago. We've never let him forget it, but we're still friends. And I mean, like, he hasn't voted Conservative ever since, right? But he's still the Tory in the group, right? That's fine.
I don't understand these English terms.
I think this idea that if someone disagrees with you on sort of matters of economics, that we somehow have to, usher them out of the room and tell them they're not welcome. Well, that doesn't seem massively inclusive to me either. Yeah.
I've watched The Crown a lot, and I still don't know the difference between the Tories and whoever
They're
else.
A football team. Oh, man. Well, I agree that there's just so much that goes on that in the world today that people tend to, it spills over into everything else. And board gaming is a hobby. I understand people wanting to, I understand people, the route that they take in terms of trying to to make the world a better place in their own little way, and that they want to make sure their little corner of the world or their little hobby that they're into.
If it's Twitter, then it's a very, very little ineffectual way.
Yes.
You should stop.
And I'm glad.
Speaking of hobbies, what other hobbies do you enjoy besides board gaming and cycling and making videos?
Acting.
Ranting. I like a rant every so often. I love a drink, although I'm having a no. This is
drinking
why I'm
a hobby?
quite so active at the moment. I'm having a no booze November at the moment. So
you are.
I haven't had a drink in weeks.
My wife enforced upon me a no drink. I think it must have been like July or June.
In the middle of summer.
It was the worst month of my life. But I had to do it to prove I wasn't an alcoholic. And I did it.
And the podcast quality went down awfully bad. Into a rut there.
But I feel like I go from hobby to hobby, and board games seem to have stuck the longest. There for a while, I was into making cakes. I was watching Cake Boss and Ace of Cakes.
What?
This is like 2000. This is some time ago.
Okay, I didn't know you back then because I've never gotten a cake.
I was making my own fondant, my own buttercream. I was into it.
Following that fondant.
Golf. I tried golf, but
golf's great.
That's a rich man's sport, though. Say here in the States, at least, because you got to have lots of money to get onto those.
Yeah, not in Britain. You have very cheap golf courses. It's great. You can play a round of golf for £5. It's great.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. No, here it's like $30 for a cheap course. I got into cycling myself at one point. I was much thinner then. I should have kept that hobby. But I quickly dismissed it, sold my bicycle. I was into... This is kind of weird. I was into collecting lighthouses.
What?
Wow.
Lighthouses.
You must have had a lot of space.
You talking about the little statues?
Like I liked lighthouses, and I liked pictures of lighthouses, and I was just enamored with... This was about 2002 or 3.
I didn't know this.
I was really into lighthouses. I don't know why.
I am extremely anti-lighthouse.
How are you anti-lighthouse?
I don't even listen to the band.
I guide the ships into the harbor.
Let them crash.
That's why you're not getting
behind that.
That's why you're not getting your games.
I'm not Lighthouse. I enjoyed the movie The Lighthouse. I recommend that.
I have not seen it.
Oh, William Dafoe.
Yeah.
He is my friend.
Pattinson. It was good.
Our Pat was in it. It's black and white. Much like myself. My thinking.
But my question to you, so what in your world, and last time I asked you, are you a happy person? What makes you happy? I would say at this point, there's a phrase my goddaughter says, Sade, and she says this, and it usually involves drink, surprisingly. When we're sitting around drinking with friends, she will say this phrase, I am content in this moment.
Right.
What is something that you're usually doing when you are content in the moment?
So firstly, happiness is a fool's errand. we should not look for happiness. Sade is absolutely right. We should look for contentment. Okay. It is not the same as happiness. Contentment is achievable. Happiness is transient and depending upon hormones and things. We should not look for happiness. It's absolutely ephemeral. I love football.
Oh yeah,
I like watching the football, and not your type.
I got you.
The proper type,
the Ted Lasso kind.
No, the greatest. So there are moments when I play games. Often Concordia does this for me, where you just feel that sort of all over body warmth that is just indefinable. But there is no question for me. The best moment you can have is it's 26 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in your foreign money.
It's 13
I don't
pounds.
know. 80 Fahrenheit.
That's 50 squid.
Right. And you are cycling down a forest path on your bike. You have your tent and you have all of your accommodation strapped to your bicycle. And although it's complete artifice, you feel completely free. And you feel that life, because we live a constrained existence, but you feel that life is potentially limitless. There was a moment I walked the Camino, which is a religious pilgrimage. I'm not religious myself, but it's a good sort of, you walk like 600 miles, right? And there was a point at which I was about halfway on the trip, and my life behind me that I'd left and my life ahead of me that I was walking towards both felt simultaneously absurd and unrealistic. My life was waking up at 5:30 in the morning, putting on my boots, walking, having a beer, finding accommodation, going to sleep, rinse and repeat. And it is the calmest I've ever felt in my adult life. It was absolutely glorious. Having just this sense of simple forward momentum was wonderful. And that's where I'm truly at peace. And that's why I love cycling, because you put your feet on the pedals and theoretically they could take you anywhere.
So then you would, with that in mind, and as most people would probably also agree, with the advent of social media, cell phones, it complicates all that.
Yeah, it's rubbish.
Makes it much worse to experience real satisfaction, because you're generally on your phone looking at someone else's false satisfaction. Oh, look at me. I'm in the Maldives on the beach. And you're thinking, why can't I be at the Maldives on the beach?
Because you don't have a bicycle.
And I'm not rich.
And you don't walk. If you would walk. You could walk to the Maldives.
Require an expensive plane ticket.
Well, you could walk down to the Chick-fil-A.
But that's true. Like the point when I'm most content is just sitting around a campfire with your friends, drinking.
Right. Yeah.
Walking down the road, drinking. Sitting in your living room, drinking. I'm thinking there's a common denominator here.
Lying around in a pool of your own urine, with tears covered in blood and snot, drinking. That's
okay. So that's
maybe we've discovered that maybe the habits and how we frame things and our hobbies, how they can affect our mindset, what we think about, what we do, the activities that we engage in. And I think that might be a clue. And I often had talked to Gabi about how people who collect board games, like I see these people who don't necessarily play them, they just collect them, they just buy them. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're always after new things. And that there's a difference between just collecting or utilizing the board games as a social interaction or something that really gives you some sort of release or some sort of a feeling or attachment to others. It's different experiences. And you see these people who buy board games by the truckload to have and to collect. Their experience is completely different than these people who just maintain a small selection of the ones that they usually bring out with their friends or their families. And it's something that is designed to bring them closer together and to have experiences. How that differs and how that can be such a much more beneficial experience than the consumerism, the whole idea of having the next greatest thing or looking for that feeling by the newest hotness. And
the people collecting are probably hoping that they experience that. I can't wait to crack open this board game and sit around with my friends and da-da-da-da-da.
It's the Schopenhauer thing, right? Isn't it? Schopenhauer basically said we vacillate between boredom and frustration. This is how human emotions work. We get to frustration, and then we work through frustration and to boredom, then from boredom to frustration. And I guess the goal of life is to try and avoid the two extremes as much as possible. So the whole idea about buying things is to release that little bit of endorphin into the brain that stops you feeling frustrated or bored. The problem is consumerism is so ephemeral. We all know down in our hearts the reason sitting around a campfire with people you really like, having a great conversation, why those are the memories that stick with you, not going to the Apple store and buying a phone. The reason those memories stick with you is because that's actually what contents us. But no one in our society, and I include myself in this, has any real interest in promoting that. You want people to buy your stuff, right? That's what it is. I have a podcast that I'm selling that I would love people to buy, right? And so it's understandable, but we do live in a society. That's why I think something like universal basic income, for instance, might help people to feel less frustrated by life, because they can say, well, then maybe I can pursue things that genuinely give me contentment rather than this fake, dirty contentment that I get for a second by going on Amazon, right?
Amazon. You gotta love Amazon. And it's just an interesting, and it's odd to me sometimes when I see people upset over the damage on their board game box. Like they've got this new Kickstarter in, and they're showing pictures of this little small crooked area that they're upset about, and how that means nothing to me. That's something that wouldn't bother me at all. But yet I realize that this hobby is something different for each person.
Absolutely.
Like it is a completely different experience. It's being utilized for various other reasons. And I enjoy board gaming. I love the idea of being able to sit down and read, have something tactile, and then have a set of rules before me that me and these other individuals are going to engage in, and this is how it's going to work. And that experience is something that's what I'm looking for. Whereas I think with others, it's more of the idea of having a collection.
So I find board game collecting very similar to polyamory in many ways. So if it works for you, more power to you. I just have my suspicions about it, right? So, but if you hand on heart say to me, man, it works for me, it's great. Go for your life. I mean, who am I to judge?
Yeah.
We need to wrap up this podcast.
I'm about to wrap. You're.
No, I didn't have anything. All I had was one note here that I want to know if you know about. You ever heard about John Glenn's fireflies when he was orbiting the Earth?
No.
So John Glenn, very famous astronaut, saw what he called fireflies when he was orbiting out in space. They were glowing. Was it a life form? Was it something amazing? No. It was his own urine as it glistened and being expelled from the spacecraft in the sunlight.
Nice.
So you can make anything beautiful if you look at it in the right way.
Absolutely.
And on that note, Ben, thank you for coming on for the second time. You need at least one or two more appearances to compete with Dan.
That's true.
We can't keep Dan off the show.
And it's understandable. He's a very nice guy.
He's much
more charismatic too.
At 5, we'll give you the green jacket, and you'll be a 5-timer.
Well, Barry, it's been a pleasure.
That's my brother. I'm a cheap man. He pays for this fancy Zoom that lets you go beyond an hour, which we have done. So that's going to do it for this episode. Everyone check out 5 Games for Doomsday, the podcast, the YouTube, designer notes on Dice Tower. Ben is
that's almost what it's called. Good job.
What is it?
Design notes.
Notes. But who makes those notes? The designers.
That's true.
Quick question about your play that you did. You were kept posting your face all bruised up. What was the story behind that?
I was a murderous gangster who had been beaten up in some sort of... No, I'd had plastic surgery.
Oh. My face that was
healing
it?
From plastic surgery.
Oh, you did?
Not really. No, my character in the play.
It's like your nose looks
so confused. Okay.
I mean, I'm naturally gorgeous. I don't need that stuff.
Your skin is glowing. Okay, so design notes on Dice Tower. Check it out.
That's right.
Anything else you want to plug to the 10 people that listen to our show?
Just give me some money.
There you go. All right, that's going to do it. I'm Gabi.
This is Jerry.
And Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Board Game Snobs. Stay classy.